Ornery bitch. Christ. So what's going on there is that popped out a bit. I'll have to do something about that here pretty quick. Anyway, was hoping the video would be off to a little bit better start than that so far, but the pulley is a little bit too small. It's not grabbing the belt quite right, and it's wet outside, and she did not want to move. So anyway, I kind of had a plan for how this video was going to go, and then of course the first thing I try, it doesn't really work right, so I got distracted. But point of the video is I'm going to show you how I swapped my 14 horse V-twin Vanguard 303 777 out for an 18 horse opposed twin. I also need to tighten that fucking nut down in there. But anyway, so the reason being for me to do this swap was because the other engine was just getting kind of tired out. There wasn't any real one thing really wrong with it besides the starter, and that was the reason why I did the swap when I did it. But the starter went out, it leaked oil, it burned oil, it smoked, it just ran kind of rough. It was starting to get really low on power. It kind of had been the whole time I'd owned it, but I don't know, it seemed like it was getting worse with some of the stuff I'd been doing with it. You know, we got that trail out there that we mow, and we got a pretty decent sized yard, and the tired old 14 horse was just that, it was tired. So I figured I'd swap one of these in. Can't be too hard, right? Well, turns out I was right. It actually wasn't that bad. Most people could do it. There are a few people out there that really are helpful when it comes to these engines. But for the most part, the Briggs and Stratton community is one of the least helpful communities. You know, I post this in the groups on Facebook and got the swap done, and everybody on there, they're, oh, that's so cool, I remember doing that, and there's like a sense of camaraderie, and then it really cracks me up. A lot of the people will ask you, well, how'd you do that? But when you're the one asking for help, nobody wants to offer it to you. You need help, you know, trying to do something, and pretty much dead silence from just about everybody in the groups. And this is across multiple groups. It's the entire Briggs community. But as soon as you accomplish something like this, then they all, you know, they'll all hop on and ask you for help. So here's what I'm doing. I'm helping. So I can't really, obviously I'm not gonna take the whole thing apart and show it step by step, but I can explain it and use the tractor here as visual aid. One of the first things that you'll want to do is right over here, right down at the bottom. You see that clip there? If my camera will focus. I don't think the camera's gonna focus. There it goes. But right down there, there's that clip. That's for the headlights, at least on these tractors, the Craftsman II specifically. That clip there is for the headlights. You unplug that. And then you take this screw out here, or a bolt. I don't think either one of these bolts I have holding this one down are original. But you take those out. And then if you can see, if I can really show it, it's kind of easier over there. But this hood, it just clips onto the frame. There's no bolting or unbolting that has to be done. You just, instead of flipping up just the hood like this, I think that might have come the rest of the way out over there. But instead of just flipping the hood up, you flip the entire column up, including this piece here. And then the whole hood will come off. I kind of recommend doing this. There's the other bolt right there. I kind of recommend doing this with 2 people because these are a little flimsy. They're just not a very good quality assembly, but they don't look bad. I like the looks of these old tractors. Vanguard Twin OHV. Now we're running a Briggs IC Twin flathead. Kind of funny on the 14 horse, pushing a little over 18 now. But anyway, once you get this off and the light's unhooked, then it goes back to wiring. This is where I'm going to kind of show what's up on this engine. So you've got this plug here and this plug there. You just kind of pull the tabs back a bit and then you just pull the wires apart. Then you'll have this one, and I kind of pulled on it. I didn't want to pull too hard and break anything, and it didn't seem to want to come off. There was no connection anywhere. So I just ended up cutting that one. And then these 2 wires hook into each other on the engine. Those don't go to the tractor. So you unplug those 2, you cut that, and then you can see they got these little clips that sit kind of like that with screws in them. Those hold your throttle and your choke on. There's the other one. You take those off to get rid of all your cables and everything. On those tractors, so these mufflers are actually not connected to that. Those bolt onto the tractor. And then it'll be hard to show you with the new bigger engine. And I think I already threw the metal plate in the scrap pile. There's a metal plate that goes down there, and that bolts to your frame on the one side, and then it bolts through your frame to your exhaust. Once you take that off, your exhaust system or your muffler will come right off. Also, you'll need to disconnect your starter cable in order to get it off. But once everything's disconnected, it's always a good idea to unplug your battery before you do any wiring, by the way. But once you get everything disconnected, there will be 4 bolts that look like that one, 2 in the back, 2 in the front. You'll disconnect those. You'll more than likely need to take this plate off, but you just pull those cotter pins and push that rod out. There's one there, and then there's one right there. So you'll need to drop the front of your deck to get to everything. And this bolt on the other side, you're gonna have to turn your steering wheel like all the way to this side, or else you're gonna have shit in your way. You're gonna have shit in your way either way. There's not much you can do about it. But you'll need to turn your wheels to get to that bolt. But once you unbolt them, that engine comes right out. It's pretty simple. Once all the wires are disconnected, your cables are disconnected, and you've pulled all your 4 of your motor mount bolts, it'll come right out. Kind of especially if you're going to leave the pulley on the engine. That's another thing I would recommend doing, is taking your pulley off of the engine before you pull the engine off. That's not, you don't have to do it that way. That's not what I did. And yeah, I would recommend doing it. So then I slapped this thing in here and started trying to figure out if the bolt holes will line up, and turns out the bolt holes will line up. Also, they don't need a nut to the top to bolt the engine down. The bottom of the block has threads in it, and it's actually the same exact size of bolt and thread pitch as the other engine needed to bolt down. So I was able to reuse the bolts, and it lined up. I don't think it was the same set of holes, but it lined up with another set of holes on this tractor, because these certain models of them did in fact have the 18 horses in them. So once you get that all figured out, it's a bit of a challenge to get it in with the pulley still hooked up to the bottom, but it can be done. It just takes some finagling. You'll want the clutch pushed all the way in sometimes, and then sometimes you'll want the clutch out. If you get somebody to help you, if nothing else, you'll want them to just kind of very carefully adjust your clutch when you need it to be moved, you know, all the way in or all the way out or halfway, or move it back just an inch. Okay, now move it forward 2 inches, and shit like that will really help you out to have somebody there. The exhaust, you'll have to pull the exhaust off to get this thing on here. It's just a pain in the ass. The angle, well, if you take the pulley off the bottom, you might not need to mess with the exhaust, but, well, you will need to mess with it at some point. But I left the pulley on. There was no way that the pulley could have stayed on and the exhaust, and I had already had this exhaust off anyways. It was sitting on there, but it was barely, the bolts weren't even finger tight, so it was just easier to pull that off of there. But once you get the engine bolted down, one of the next things you'll want to do is put your exhaust back on. And that pretty much, I have another video of it. I'll try and find it and link it in the description. But there's a plate. So you know how you can see the frame down in there? With that plate, you wouldn't have been able to see that, and that bolted to the bottom of your engine. I had the throttle wired up a little bit differently, just temporarily, because I was retarded and didn't really notice that divot in the intake manifold. And I had my throttle run up from down there, and it actually did work fairly well, but not as well as, you know, the proper way to do it. So I cut that off, and then the pipe at the very bottom, I don't really want to be getting on the ground. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. I'm not sure if that picked it up or not. But that pipe coming out of your exhaust curves like directly into the frame rail where grass and shit gets kind of sucked up in there. So I cut that just so it would be straight, because I don't want my tractor to catch on fire, and it doesn't really matter. Eventually I'm going to do something completely different for the exhaust. We're not even going to have that muffler on there. But for now, that's what we're working with for an exhaust. It's kind of starting to rain again, which sort of sucks. Anyway, your next step after that, once you get everything bolted down and your exhaust on and your pulley on and your belts and everything, at this point you don't have to do it in this order, but you can put your deck back together. I would recommend doing 2 people with that. It's a pain in the ass to do it by yourself, but it can be done. As for the wiring, and I have a separate video on wiring these engines up, but there are 2 wires that come out of the block right there, and they go into this clip. You'll have a white one and a red one. The white one for these is for the lights, but I've already showed you how the lights hook up on this specific tractor, so I just cut that. The red one that's coming out can either go to your solenoid or directly to the positive battery terminal. It's got to be on the positive. That's the way I did it. It's pretty easy and simple. You'll have this wire here on the back of your shroud, that can bolt to your frame, that can bolt to just about anywhere on your frame. I have it hooked up right down there. And then for your starter cable, you just bolt that up as normal. I recommend using the starter cable that's attached to your tractor, not one that comes with the engine, but you can go either way, but it's easier to use the one that's on your tractor. And then over here, you'll have that little yellow wire coming off of your block. So if you'll remember, down there's those two wires that were hooked up to the other engine, and they're not even plugged in. But if you'll remember, I had to cut that one. And that third wire, that one I ended up cutting, hooks to the yellow wire. That's your kill switch. And it's as simple as that, man. That's the only wiring that's on this thing. And then after that, it's just a matter of getting your throttle and your choke hooked up. So for the choke, you can check out my other video. I have it just wired up, and I'm using the breather box as a latch to hold the choke open. So that's not really functional right now, but it's good enough. For the throttle, it just hooks into that hole. Let's see if I can kind of point to it. Now my camera will go out of focus, but it's the closest hole to you from this side of the tractor, the driver's side if this was a 2-passenger vehicle. And you just clip the throttle in there. You'll need a screw to go in there in your intake manifold. It has a washer on it that would probably work on its own. I stole one of the clips from the other tractor's engine and put it on there anyways. And what you want to do is, and don't reef on it, but you'll want to pull this cable back all the way as far as it can go while being hooked up to the throttle, and then bolt that down. Because if you have slack, all it's going to do is that cable is just going to slide around. The outer cable is going to slide up and down on the inner cable, and it isn't going to do you any good for your throttle. Make sure that that's tight. You don't have to be fucking Hercules with it. Have some common sense. Don't be a dumbass. But you want some good tension on that. And the choke runs virtually the same way. If you can see that little hole right there in that divot, you want another one of these, a much longer choke cable than what I have. I still have to invest in a better choke cable. But you'll want one of those little mechanisms right there that holds the throttle cable down. And you'll run it forward past the engine and then turn it. And then run it like that. And that's pretty much it, man. That's really all there is to do in these swaps. If you don't know how the wiring works, figuring out how to wire this up is 10 times harder than actually wiring it up. It's not a difficult swap. It's anybody with any bit of mechanical knowledge could do this. These 18 horses are great engines. They run forever. Don't get me wrong, they have their downsides. They're loud. They're not very smooth. You know, they vibrate. They run kind of rough, just naturally. They're not the highest revvers. They're built for really mid-range to low-end torque. They can rev high. They can rev pretty high, but that's not where they're efficient. That's just not what they were designed for. They're not designed to be idled up at 4,000 RPM all day long. These engines are maybe not even the best engines for cutting grass as they are for towing and like garden tractor work. If you had some kind of, I'm not sure how you could even hook a PTO up to a vertical shaft, but work like that, man, is what these things are good at. They're low and slow, towing, mud tractors. Or even if you're building a race mower and you have like a 2-to-1 pulley ratio and you need solid low-end torque to really get you up to speed, awesome engines for that. And they do a great job cutting grass too. It's mainly, they're loud, they're shaky, they're kind of cold-blooded when you're firing up, and they do burn a bit more fuel. You will notice a difference in fuel. But otherwise, I really recommend these engines, man. Swap them into anything that you need them to. They're good for mowing grass. They're good in anything. They might not be the best at everything, but they're not bad at any one thing either. they're just awesome engines, and they look good. I mean, look at how that looks in there. I mean, it's kind of tight. Oh, I also mentioned, I forgot to mention gas line. Those have a fuel pump on them, like a pulse fuel pump, whatever they call them. Basically runs off a vacuum. This one is, you can kind of see the edge of it right there. So that's basically, it looks quite a bit different, but it serves the same function. And then you just hook your gas line up to that. I got a new fuel filter in here and just ran it along this way, since that's how it ran on the other tractor. And the hose still comes out on the same side for the pump, but the pump on that, the pump on those engines is really kind of right up here off to the side, where it's right on the front for these. So if you think you can just use the original gas line, you can't. It's a lot further of a stretch. You are going to need more gas line. And then also kind of same with the choke. The original choke cable will not work. It's not long enough. The original throttle cable, matter of fact, is really too long, but it does still work. It just, yeah, you can see the throttle cable here. It's a long one. So the throttle cables are a bit long. You could go with a shorter one, but and the choke cable is just a little bit too short to run the throttle. And the throttle cable could, in fact, run the choke probably, but because I was looking at switching those up and, you know, using the choke lever for the throttle and using the throttle for the choke, but it wasn't going to work like that. So that's how I got that rigged up. Just kind of trying to think of anything else I could offer you guys to help you out, other than, you know, the hood goes back on the same way you took it off. It's, yeah, that's pretty much it, man. These things that they take, mine took a little over 1.5 quarts. Well, it took 1.5 quarts, and then I added a little bit more just because this thing had been sitting, and it hasn't ran for very long, and it has burned some of that extra oil up already. Another thing with these engines, even when they were brand new, they burned some oil, and it's not like there's a big old cloud of blue smoke or nothing, but when you fire them up first thing in the morning, they stink a little bit. They got a bit of smell. If it's real cold and you idle it kind of high right off the bat, you might get a little puff of blue smoke, and that's just, you know, it's kind of all these engines. It's just the way they are. It doesn't even mean anything's wrong with them. I mean, if you have excessive blue smoke all the time, then something is indeed wrong with your tractor. But it's just kind of the way these are. I still have to do something about the choke. And but that's pretty much it. That's how you swap one of these engines into these tractors. You know, just kind of to recap, you know, you pull the hood off, you unplug the lights and all your wiring, you get the other engine pulled out of here, you slap this one back in, and it should, your tractor should, if it's one of these Craftsman IIs anyways, should have bolt holes that this will sit on. And, you know, I've covered how to do the wiring, how to do the throttle. Like I say, you'll have to do a little bit of cutting to your exhaust to really get that to fit right. But other than that, there's not much to it. So hopefully this helps somebody. This is, besides that thing fucking up, this is how it sits. I didn't have to modify the body or anything. I thought I might have to do some cutting right up on there, and maybe I still will, just because it'd be kind of cool to see the engine hanging out the side, I guess. But yeah, I didn't have to do any crazy fabrication to it. I think as far, the most difficult thing I had to do on it, like physically demanding thing I had to do, is probably just cutting the exhaust, or I fucked around with the deck by myself. I recommend getting, anytime you're working on a deck, if you want it to go easy and smooth and you don't want to cuss up a storm and be losing tools and shit, I would recommend having 2 people to help with the deck. Other than that, man, this was mostly a one-man project. My brother helped a little bit with the wiring, and that was it. So hopefully this helps somebody. Like I say, I do recommend doing this swap if it's something that you're looking into. Highly recommend it. The 18 horse opposed twin Briggses, in my opinion, are some of the best small engines ever built. I wouldn't say they are the best. I think the Kohler Command series definitely gives them a run for their money. Really, some of the Kohler Command series are in fact better than the 18 horse Oppies. But you know, the price of those is really going up, and it is on these things too. But those Kohlers are getting expensive, and it's almost kind of like a novelty to have a Kohler, you know, twin cylinder on a lawn tractor at this point anymore. I mean, you got the Kohler Courage engines, but shit, they call them the Courage because you need to have a lot of it to fucking trust one of them things to do anything for you. They're actually not that bad, but they're not as good as these. Matter of fact, the Kohler Courage engine, I would actually say, is worse than these. And these aren't bad engines either. They're just, they weren't built like the 18 horses were. That is for damn sure. So anyway, this is going on about a 26-minute video. I feel like there was something else I was gonna say and just kind of forgot. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, I am going to be having more content on this tractor coming out, along with the 73 Bolins and the 69 and 70 Bolins. I got 3 Bolins out there. Got a 6.2 diesel Suburban that needs a new transmission, but I got more content coming out soon, especially now that winter's rolling around and I'll be able to work on shit because it'll just be snowy and not wet, and it won't be 109 fucking degrees. So got a lot planned. So like, comment, subscribe, would really appreciate it. And I hope this helps. If you guys have any questions, comment below, or you can join the Misfit Mowers Stock and Custom Tractors group on Facebook. There's a lot of really knowledgeable people in there. I'm in there. It's a good way to get a hold of me. And yeah, that's pretty much what's up. So peace out. Have a good one.